Mongraal is a pro Fortnite player and streamer for Faze clan, and he's recognized as one of the best Fortnite players in the world. In this video, we're going to take a look at the keybinds, the settings, the sensitivity, and the setup that Mongraal uses to play Fortnite. We're going to be taking a deep analysis at some of the things that he uses, so you can learn from what Mongraal is doing. But before we get started, make sure you subscribe to the channel so when I release a new video, you get notified. Now, let's begin with what I believe are the most important settings in Fortnite, and that's your building keybinds. Mongol's building keybinds are as follows. His wall is on his thumb mouse button, his floor is on the DPI button on his mouse, which is bound to N, his stairs is on the other thumb mouse button, his roof is bound to left shift, and this trap slot is on C. So, you see that Mongraal has his three most important building pieces, that's his wall, his floor, and his stairs, bound to his mouse. He's kept his keybinds the same for these three building pieces since the very start of Fortnite, so he's had a ton of practice with them, and that will help to explain why he's such a fast builder. As you know, you use your wall, your floor, and your stairs in many Fortnite building sequences. Therefore, you need good coordination between the fingers that you use to press those keys. For most people, the best way to build quickly is to place your building pieces on different fingers, but Mongol's keybinds are a little different. He has his wall and stairs bound to the two side buttons on his mouse, which he presses with his thumb. Having your wall and stairs bound to your thumb mouse buttons is a good idea. It's the same keybinds that I use, and many other Fortnite pro players use this configuration as well, for example Ninja. Mongraal also has his floor bound to his mouse, and he's able to do this because he has a mouse with 8 programmable buttons. He uses the DPI button on the top of his mouse, which he presses with his index finger, and I'll go into a bit more detail about his mouse in just a moment, but for now, let's continue onward to his final building piece, which is the roof, and he has that bound to left shift. Left shift is an excellent keybind to use because you can press it easily using your pinky finger, but you'll need to enable sprint by default in your Fortnite settings, which most players, including Mongraal, use. For trapping enemies, Mongraal uses C. You can press C using either your index finger or your thumb. C is a really good key because it's close to your W key, which you use to move forward in Fortnite, and to make it easier to press C, you could angle your keyboard, and this will make a difference, particularly if you want to use your thumb. So, Mongraal doesn't use his index or ring fingers for pressing any of his building keys. He only uses the buttons on his mouse and his pinky finger for left shift. In other words, he has a bunch of good keys left over on his keyboard, so let's see how he uses them in this next section. Here are Mongraal's Fortnite weapon keybinds. His harvesting tool is on E, weapon slot 1 is 2, weapon slot 2 is Q, weapon slot 3 is R, weapon slot 4 is 4, and weapon slot 5 is X. So you see that Mongraal uses very unique and unusual keybinds for accessing the weapons and in his inventory and his pickaxe. Now, these keybinds may look a little random to you and make very little sense, but Mongraal is actually using a lot of good keys here that are close to the WASD movement keys, for example E, Q, and R. And he's able to use these keys because he has most of his building keybinds bound to his mouse. A lot of Fortnite players just use the numbers 1 through to 6 for their weapon and pickaxe, and having them in ascending order from low to high makes a lot of intuitive sense. But it's not a requirement, as Mongraal shows us here. Clearly, Mongraal would prefer to use different keys, and as long as you spend enough time playing with your keybinds, as Mongraal has, you can master any order and build the muscle memory and speed required. Now that we've covered the main keybinds, that's your building and weapon keybinds in detail, we're going to finish off by looking at the rest of Mongraal's keybinds, and then we're going to get into his mouse and sensitivity and settings. So here are some of the other important keybinds that Mongraal has. His edit key is on F, his use key is on 3, and he also has a secondary keybind of mouse wheel up. His reload button is his middle mouse button. His repair or upgrade is 1. Crouch is left control. Sprint by default is on. His inventory is on left alt, and his map is on tab. Obviously, Mongraal is a super fast editor, and he's able to do that because he has edit on a good key, F. And F is really easy to press with your index finger because it's close to your W key. His use key is on 3, which is a really unusual keybind, and I don't think I've seen another player use that. And he also has it bound to mouse wheel up. I'm not sure which one he uses, however, using your mouse wheel as a use key is a really smart idea because it can help you win chest wars, particularly if you have an infinite scroll wheel because you can just flick it up and it's hard for anyone to compete with you. Another unusual keybind that Mongol uses is having reload on his middle mouse button. Reload isn't really an essential action, therefore it doesn't need to be on a very good key, so using his middle mouse button for this action is a good idea. His crouch key is on left control, and this is really normal because it's the default key. I prefer using left shift for crouch personally, but Mongol uses that for his building piece. And then for accessing his inventory in his map, he uses left alt and tab keys respectively, and these are good choices as you'll need to access your inventory to rearrange your items and look at the map frequently to see where the next zone is. Something else I want to mention is that Mongol uses his mouse wheel down as a secondary edit keybind and has his reset edit button. In other words, Mongol does use the scroll wheel reset edit trick in Fortnite, and I have a video to this which I'll leave a link to on the screen now. With his keybinds out of the way, let's now look at Mongol's mouse. Mongol uses the Logitech G402 mouse, and he's used this throughout his entire Fortnite career. The G402 has 8 programmable buttons, and as you know, Mongol uses 3 of them for his building pieces. You can easily remap and reassign your mouse keys in Fortnite by using the Logitech gaming software. Mongol has changed his DPI shift button at the top of the mouse to be remapped to N, and he uses that for building his floors. Here are the specifications for the Logitech G402. The length is 136mm, the width is 72mm, the height is 41mm, and the weight is 108 grams. So this is a rather large mouse, and you'll need rather large hands for it to be right for you, otherwise you may have trouble aiming. A good general rule of thumb for choosing a mouse size is to measure your hand from the base of your wrist to the tip of your middle finger. Then, take this number and multiply it by 0.66. The resulting number that you get will roughly correspond to your ideal mouse length. Now I want to talk a little bit about the weight of the G402. Competitive shooter players and Fortnite players typically use a mouse that's well under 100 grams. For example, you have the Air 58 Ninja, which is really popular with Fortnite players, and that weighs 58 grams. But the Logitech G402 weighs 108 grams. In other words, it's a fairly heavy mouse. Some players, though, prefer to use a heavy mouse because they think that it helps to control and steady their aim. More important than weight for gaming, though, is the sensor of the mouse, and you know that Logitech is renowned for creating a mouse with an excellent sensor, and the G402 is no exception, because it uses the Fusion Engine Hybrid Sensor, a combination of an optical sensor featuring Logitech Delta Zero technology. In other words, the G402 is able to track properly at high speeds for competitive gaming, and this is really helpful if you're someone like Mongol because he moves his mouse so quickly across his mousepad and he needs very precise tracking. This is a fine mouse for gaming, and the additional buttons make it a great choice for Fortnite players, and you can get it for fairly cheap too, and I'll leave a link in the description for how you can get it on Amazon. With the keybinds and mouse out of the way, let's now take a look at Mongol's sensitivity. Mongol changes his sensitivity fairly frequently, but here's the most up-to-date sensitivity that he's using as of today. He has his X and Y axis sensitivity set to 5.4%, and his targeted sensitivity and mouse scope sensitivity are both at 24.4%. Mongol also uses a DPI of 800, and he's recently changed to 800 after using 400 for a very long time. Now that we know his DPI and his sensitivity, we can work out his eDPI, which is 43.2, and this is a fairly low sensitivity. Also, Mongol has his X and Y sensitivities equal to one another, and this is something I recommend all Fortnite players do. Previously, Mongol had his Y sensitivity less than his X sensitivity, but as there's so much verticality in Fortnite because of the building, it makes sense to have your Y sensitivity or your vertical sensitivity the same as your X or horizontal sensitivity. Your targeting sensitivity and scope sensitivity act as modifiers for reducing your mouse sensitivity when targeting or aiming down sights and when using scoped weapons. Mongol now has both his targeting and scope sensitivity set to the same value of 24.4, and 24.4% is a low targeting and scope sensitivity. And because Mongraal already uses a low base sensitivity, it means his mouse movements when aiming down sights or using scoped weapons are going to be very slow. Therefore, it can be as precise as possible, and this can be really useful when you're trying to laser people out of the sky when they're gliding in, for example. Next, we're going to take a look at Mongols Fortnite setup. As you know, Mongols is a professional Fortnite player, so it makes sense for him to have an amazing PC. Here are the gaming PC specs that he uses according to his Twitch profile. He has the GPU as the GTX 1080 Ti, an Intel Core i7-8086, a 500GB Samsung 970 EVO M2 SSD, a 2TB hard disk drive, and the ASUS ROG Strix Z370E motherboard, and 4x8 DDR4 3200 MHz of RAM. This is a really powerful PC, but I'm not sure if Mongraal's Twitch bio is out of date and if he uses the RTX 2080 Ti and the Intel Core i9-9900K. But either way, it's going to be a super powerful PC, and it's going to be really expensive because the best performance comes at a premium price. You can, of course, build a PC that's more than capable of playing and streaming Fortnite for a lot cheaper than the PC that Mongraal uses. And a good example of this is the PC that Mongraal uses as a second PC or his streaming PC. Again, according to his Twitch profile, he has the GPU as the GTX 1060, the CPU as the Intel Core i7-7700K, a motherboard of the H110M S2HCF, and 2x8GB DDR4 2400 MHz of RAM. Mongraal has this entire second PC dedicated to streaming, so his first PC can handle all of the gaming requirements. Therefore, he can stream to the highest quality to his viewers while playing Fortnite with the highest possible FPS. But for most people, and if you're looking to get into streaming, a one PC setup is absolutely fine. Now with his PC out of the way, let's take a look at the peripherals that Mongraal has. His headset is the Corsair Void RBG, the keyboard is the Corsair K65, and he has a 240Hz gaming monitor and a 144Hz secondary stream monitor, and both of these are 24 inches. And for his mousepad, he has the glorious 3XL 1000mm mousepad, which is the huge one that completely covers your desk, so you have plenty of mouse room. You want a really big mouse pad when you're playing Fortnite, particularly if you use a low sensitivity like Mongraal, because you never want to run out of mouse pad space. Now let's take a look at the video settings Mongraal uses in Fortnite. Mongraal's a competitive player, so he's going to use settings that allow him to get the highest possible FPS while minimizing distractions. Here are the display settings that he uses. His window mode is set to full screen, his resolution is 1920 by 1080, and his frame limit is 240 FPS. You always want to have your window mode set to full screen because any of the other options can cause mouse alignment problems, and most people will be using a 1920 by 1080 resolution, unless of course you use a stretched resolution in Fortnite, which Mongraal used to do but doesn't anymore since Epic made changes to it. And Mongraal has his frame limit capped to 240 FPS, which matches the display rate of his 240Hz monitor. Here are Mongraal's graphics settings. He has his brightness set to 98%, user interface contrast at 1.08x, his colorblind mode is Deuteranope, and his colorblind strength is 8. So Mongraal's brightness is slightly lower than the default setting, but he could have adjusted his monitor settings, so it's hard to tell exactly what his real brightness settings are. His user interface contrast is slightly higher than the default, and Mongraal uses the Deuteranope colorblind mode with a strength of 8, and this colorblind mode could help you see enemies more easily through the storm, or just generally see colors better if you have a colorblind deficiency, so it's worth trying or finding out which colorblind mode is best for you. Now let's take a look at the graphics quality settings Mongraal uses. His 3D resolution is 100%, his view distance is epic, shadows are off, anti-aliasing is off, textures are low, effects are low, and post-processing is low. This should not come as too much of a surprise that he has his graphics quality settings set to low, even though he has a monster of a PC, because he just really wants to get the most FPS possible because it can make you better at Fortnite. The only setting that he hasn't got set to low or off is his view distance, and that's set to epic, and this will help him increase the distance that he can see other players and objects, which could give you an advantage. And here are Mongol's advanced graphics settings. He has his VSync off, motion blur off, show FPS on, he uses DirectX version 11, allow multi-threaded rendering is on. He has VSync helps to synchronize your graphics card, FPS, to the display rate of your monitor, and this can help to reduce tearing, but it can lower your FPS and increase input lag. So Mongol, like many players, have VSync turned off and will just put up with any tearing that happens. Motion blur is turned off, of course, because why would anyone ever want that enabled? Mongoal has his FPS on throughout the game, as most players do as well, so he can see if there are any performance drops while playing Fortnite. As for his DirectX version, Mongoal is currently using the older DirectX 11, and finally he has allow multi-threaded rendering on, because this can help improve performance on multi-core processors, such as the one that Mongoal is using. Okay, that just about covers everything there is to cover about Mongoal's Fortnite settings and keybinds. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel and turn on post notifications, because it really helps my channel grow. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment and I'll reply to you. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching and have an amazing day. Peace.